Can everyone hear me? We're good. Perfect. My name's Jaclyn. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. I haven't spoken a bit, so give me a moment. Especially I haven't spoken on Zoom. I've spoken in person a couple times since we've been back. Thank you, Paige, for asking me. I've had the honor and the privilege of getting to know Paige through COVID, through my sponsor. And this summer, actually, I think a month now, she came down to Hamilton for my Cocaine Anonymous roundup. So Zoom's crazy and wild, how people connect, right? And I'm glad to see that you guys you're still keeping it going alive and well. I was sharing when I first got on that during the beginning of the pandemic, me and a group of women started some women's meetings that now have like over 6,000 women in our Facebook group. And we still run I think we still run 12 to 15 meetings a week, including AA and Al-Anon. I think it's important to qualify so that everyone knows that I do deserve a seat in the rooms I belong to Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous. At one point, I belonged to Al-Anon as well. 3 fellowships got a lot for me. I currently have taken a back seat from Cocaine Anonymous just because life has gotten very full very quick, as I'm sure some of you may know. With the life that God has granted me, right? So yeah, I do belong to quite a few fellowships. I was the disease of more, definitely more. Didn't really have a drug of choice, but I guess I'm an alcoholic through and through. I'm the alcoholic that the big book describes. I'm also an alcoholic who loves cocaine and methamphetamine. So that being said, my dry date is October 11th, 2016. By God's grace, I'll have 6 years in a couple weeks. And that blows my absolute mind. Like it really, really does. Like I cannot believe that 6 years ago, like I can't, first of all, I can't believe it's been 6 years, but like this time 6 years ago, I was in the throes of this disease. My mom had left for Europe, and the last 3 weeks of my run were absolute complete torture and hell. And I put the people I love the most in jeopardy, the most, right? I was at a place in my recovery or in my addiction where the only reason I had a roof over my head was because my parents provided one for me. I was at a place where I was selling myself for money. I was at a place where a life of crime had become the norm. And I did anything to get, what I needed to get for that day. But I still would have told you that alcohol and drugs weren't the problem. Still would have told you that I was living a life that I could somewhat manage, or that I just wanted to be able to go to a wedding and have one, or I just wanted to go to New Year's, you know what I mean, and be able to have a couple, or I didn't want to drink and drive, or I didn't want to humiliate myself, or I didn't, want to, worry my parents, or terrify my partners. Like I really did want to live a life that was the book talks about, we have these moral and philosophical convictions galore, right? The book talks about I have all these good ideas, these good concepts, I'm a really good starter, right? Not a really good finisher. And I have all these ideas of what my life should be, right? Bill talks about it in the beginning of his story. He thought he was going to be placed at the head of vast enterprises with the utmost prestige, right? And if you had asked me in high school what I wanted to be, honestly, I had a high school boyfriend. I would have told you I wouldn't have been married with kids or married and be a doctor or a lawyer. I really didn't have addict and alcoholic on the agenda. It was really not a part of what I thought my life is going to be. Today, I would not change it for the world. Today, it has actually given me purpose and direction. However, this time 6 years ago, I was a really, really sick girl, really, really sick. I look at life today, and I look at my problems, and a very dear mentor of mine once told me when I was in so much self at the beginning of the summer, he said to me, "What if there are no problems?" And I wanted to smack him so hard. I actually wanted to come through the phone and, yell at him. And the truth is that line has stuck with me since then. There are no problems, right? Drinking and using is a problem. Not having enough to use and drink is a problem, not having a roof over your head, problem. Not having money in the bank, problem. Driving without a valid license, problem. But really, I got into a fight with my boyfriend today. That's the extent. And it's over because he didn't invite me to the fair. Like, seriously, that's my problem today. I'm not lying. Even though I told my one night to myself and I couldn't come anyways, that's my problem. And it's not. And I see it, right? I see it for like what it is today. And I can see how ego works in my life. Thank God, right? Thank God I came into these rooms and you guys gave me more than you solved more than the drink and the drug problem for me, right? You gave me a God of my understanding, and I will forever be indebted to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for that. For not only saving my life, but providing me with the greatest relationship I've ever known, and I hope to ever know. So yeah, like I said, I'm not a special addict. I'm not a special alcoholic. I qualified for this program right from the get-go. When I was 12 years old, I took my first drink. I drank a bottle of vodka with a bunch of my girlfriends. I obviously drank more than them. I had alcohol poisoning, the whole 9 yards, whole back gamut, like stomach pumped, charcoal down my throat, hospital stint. Like I, that's how I started. Like I set the bar really, really, really low. And then, like I wasn't, I heard a speaker say the other day, like I was never a social drinker. Like I never went for cocktails. And I laughed at her, like laughed, because I would have told you I was going for like 8 glasses of wine, but like it was never 8 glasses of wine. And so that's how I would drink. I drank, I chased it. I loved what it did for I love what it did for me. Alcohol, the book talks about it. It took an exhilarating part of my life. I had a lot of fair weather friends. I was the life of the party. I was in the bar scene from the time I was like 15, 16. I was full-time bartending. I did all of that. I did all that until it stopped working, and it stopped working probably somewhere in my early 20s. Really, really stopped working. I came to my first AA meeting when I was 21, 22. My boyfriend at the time had brought me. I don't remember much of it. I know I cried. I know I got a nice book and a shiny coin. I know there was a speaker, but I knew nothing else, right? You guys had that word. It was God, and it might as well have been 26 letters of the alphabet, because for a girl that was raised Roman Catholic, and I was raised with a punitive God, it scared me. I really probably thought that AA was a cult, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I had no clue what 12 steps were. I had no clue what a sponsor was. I didn't stay long enough to get immersed in this. I wasn't done. Quite simply, I wasn't done, and there was no convincing me of that. The book talks about, being beaten into this state, and reason is that alcohol is the great persuader, and that's exactly what had to have happened for my type. I needed to be beaten into that state. I didn't come into the rooms. I had nothing left, literally nothing. Like, yes, like external things were gone, but like the internal condition, like I had lost all sense of like pride. I had lost all sense of like self-respect, all sense of anything worthwhile I had lost. And I needed that. I needed to have a really low bottom. I think if I had to come in here with like, the job or the house or the boyfriend still, I believe you would have a different speaker wholeheartedly, right? Some people can come in and they still have things, and that's great. But I latched onto the idea that because I still had things, I could still drink, I could still use. When I went to treatment on October 11th, actually, 6 years ago, and my treatment center was not a 12-step based, but they surrounded us with 12-step based. And I will forever be indebted to that, right? We went to meetings every night out of the house. We went to NA, we went to CA, we went to AA, or they were brought into the house. There was a whole like class we took on, the first 4 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was provided to me, the solution from the very beginning. And I was open enough and awake enough for the first time in my life to hear something, right? There was a man who came in and he carried a message of depth and weight. I didn't know at the time what that meant, but for the first time in my life, there was somebody who used like I did, who drank like I did, and who was laughing about it. And that kind of just perked me up enough to be like, well, what? You're not in pain anymore, right? You're not broken anymore. You're not devastated anymore. I will forever be indebted to that man. He actually has a baby now with one of my girlfriends, and I get to watch him become a father, right? And this goes to show you how God works in my life. I have no clue how God works in my life. I was placed in a treatment center in Toronto. I live just like 45 minutes outside of Toronto. And one of the people in my treatment facility was a member, a sober, or it's not obviously not a sober member in rehab. He was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had been around Hamilton, and he knew the fellowship. And if you know Hamilton, um, we have great fellowship, right? We have great meetings where we are definitely out of the big book. And I didn't know another way. And thank God for that man, because he took me under his wing. I clung to him. I was so scared when I came into the rooms. And I surrounded myself with a lot of men in the beginning, not women. I didn't know that I should surround myself with women. I was a terrified little girl, and I had such a fear of going back to the life I was living. Like such a terror. Like it was horrific, the life I was living and the people I was surrounding myself with. And I really did not want to go back. I remember sitting in rehab and thinking, okay, April 11th is 6 months sober. Like, how am I going to make it to April 11th? Like, how am I going to make it through Christmas? And you know what I mean? I didn't know how I was going to make it through the Super Bowl. I don't watch football, but I use it as an excuse to drink. And I remember thinking, like, how am I going to get through these events? Right. And I got out of rehab like 6 days before Christmas. And I really don't recommend it. I should have just stayed for Christmas and New Year's, because like your first Christmas and New Year's sober, like I was in it sober, and it was like raw, exposed skin. It was so uncomfortable, but I just immersed myself in the rooms, right? Our area social club is opened up for 72 hours around the clock at Christmas. Like each group puts on a meeting on the hour, and it's beautiful. And like I just sat in meetings, you know? And so when I was in treatment, they told me, you know, get a sponsor, get a home group, and get active, and do the steps. And so I had no clue what any of that was, like none. I had no, like, I kind of saw them on the wall, but like I really had no clue what the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous looked like. And so this woman came up to me. I was at a meeting, and she said, do you want to start reading the book? She said, do you want to start reading? And I had no clue. She scared the shit out of me, and I had no clue what she meant. And I just said, oh, okay, yes. And then she said, okay, read this chapter out of this big book, and meet me at this coffee shop on like whatever day, Sunday at like 3 p.m. And I said, okay. And I read, right? And for the first time, one of the things she had me do was when I was reading Bill's stories, where I think, drink, act, and feel like Bill, right? Do I identify with that? Can I read the doctor's opinion? Do I identify with the allergy? All of that stuff. And for the first time, I think in my life, I really started to like have an awareness around the disease of alcoholism. Not just that alcohol was my problem. I really started to see that like I have an internal condition, and whether I got relief from it or not, I don't really remember. My early recovery is honestly such a blur, but I do remember that I did take the direction from the woman that scared the shit out of me. She was an ex crack dealer, and she wasn't allowed back in Ottawa, which is our nation's capital. She had the Ottawa police had actually said to her, like, you're not allowed back in. Like, that's how you can amend your behavior to Ottawa, is never to come back into this city. And that was the woman, you know, who got me connected to a God of my understanding. And so I remember the first time I met her, she grabbed my hand and she prayed in the middle of the coffee shop. And I was like, what are you doing? And like on the spine of the big book, it says Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would turn it in so nobody would know I was in AA. But the truth is, I drank all over the city of Hamilton, guys. Like I drank all over my city, in every dive bar, in every fancy bar. Like I drank everywhere. I don't know what I was trying to like hide. Like it was, people were relieved when I came to AA. Like nobody said, why are you going there? Like people were like, it's about time, right? Like that's the kind of drunk I am. And so this woman, you know, she takes me through step one. And essentially, you know, it really wasn't hard for me to admit the powerless piece. I can see I'm powerless. I can see that my life left to me runs me into like homelessness, right? It runs me into like credit debt and like payday loans and prostitution and running drugs. Like that's what me drinking does. I can see the powerlessness piece. The unmanageability piece, that's a whole different story for me, because for me, I thought unmanageability was the external, right? I didn't realize it was this internal. I would have still told you I have my parents. I would have still told you I have relationships. I would have told you I don't know what depression is. But when I really got to the point of it, like a feeling of uselessness, yes, I had no clue what my purpose was. The best way I can describe my life and the way I thought my life was going to go was like quicksand. Like I would just get sand in my hands and I would just like this, like, you know what I mean? It would just come out like nothing lasted. Like the harder I tried to grip, the more it fell apart. And so when she explained to me the unmanageability piece of step one, of like, you know, we talk about this malady. She didn't use terms like malady because I had no clue what that was, but she talked about it like this void, right? And I'm constantly using things to fill this void. And I use people, I use places, I use drugs, I use alcohol, I use anything outside of me. And what she suggested was perhaps there might be something greater than me. And for the first time in my life, you know, I didn't say no to this concept of God. But the beautiful thing is that for the first time, I got sober at 30. So for the first time in my life, somebody said to me, you get to choose God. I had been told up until that point what God was. I had been told from a very young age that God was this, right? He was a man in the sky. He was like Christ. He was Jesus. Like, you know what I mean? You had to repent. You had to, like, there was punishment. If you didn't do certain things, you would be shunned. I learned about like purgatory for little children. Like, I was just really in this conception, and there's nothing wrong with that God. Trust me, I've done a lot of work that I'm actually in a position of neutrality with that God. I go to church with my mother, right, who is a practicing Catholic. It's just not what I choose to believe today. And so for the first time, this woman says to me, like, do you see that you're powerless, right? Do you see that left to your own devices, you will pick up a drink again? And how do I know that? Look at the first 30 years of my life. I drank for 17 years, 12 to 30, right? What is that? 16, 17 years, 18 years. And I drank alcoholically, right? And the crazy thing that the most insane thing I ever did was I continued to pick up that drink, knowing the book talks about with all its intended suffering, knowing there was going to be consequences, knowing I was going to break hearts, knowing that I would not stop. I still continued to pick up the drink in the hopes that one day somehow I would be able to, you know, control and enjoy, manage. Someday I would just be able to like be okay, right? No matter how many times I overshoot the mark. No, like every time. Like every time, right? I was not a social drinker. I like the book talks about the three types of drinker. I was never a moderate drinker. Maybe when I was 12, like when you can only get it moderately. But like I even drank alcoholically at like 13, 14. And so this unmanageability piece, she says to me, you know, it's like this God-shaped hole and you've used everything else outside of you to fill it. And perhaps there might be something that can help you with that, right? And so I don't really remember much of my first step two experience. Like I just know that someone basically told me, it's whatever your conception was, right? She had me do this chart in my book, like God is and God isn't, and really start to look at these qualities that I wanted to embody of perhaps what maybe a God was: love, compassion, understanding, you know, forgiving, things like qualities like I talked about the moral and philosophical convictions galore, things that I wanted to live up to, right? To be the good daughter, to be the good sister, to be the accountable partner, the loving person, right? Like the things that I wanted to embody that I just couldn't. And perhaps that could help restore me, right? I've come to believe I'm insane over the first drink. I've come to believe in an allergy. I've come to believe in this obsession of the mind because my experience shows me, right? And I have a woman that qualifies me through that. And so step two is like, I'm just, you know, can I believe perhaps that this thing might work for me? Perhaps, right? That keyword, perhaps. Today I know it like as God, but I think when I was first in, I was so fearful of going back that I was like, I know people say it, but like you literally could have told me to hop on one foot in the first year of my recovery and I would have done it. Like I was just so terrified. And I remember the first time that I got on my knees to pray, I was in a Tim Hortons coffee shop and this woman was doing the third step prayer with me and I had no clue what it was. But for me, I thought the third step with prayer was supposed to be like something magical. Like I thought even when I first started sponsoring, I was like going to do it on like the side of the mountain, which by the way, I'm from Hamilton. Our mountain is nothing compared to the Rockies out in Alberta, but we call it the mountain. Basically, it's like a freaking hill. but I was like, listen, we're going to do it on the side of the hill. And like, I thought maybe there should be candles, or like, I thought it was supposed to be like this romantic gesture. But the truth is, God saves me from the pit, not the pulpit. And so I prayed in a coffee shop, like a Tim Hortons coffee shop on like some dingy ass floor in downtown Hamilton, which is like seedy. And, and I didn't even know what the third step prayer was. And I know it today, like I'm just willing to continue with the rest of the work. But in the beginning, it's like, listen, you're going to turn your life and your will over to the care of something. And the best way it was ever explained to me, and I still love this, it doesn't say control, it says care, right? It was explained to me that like I'm going to give my life over to the care. If I think of care, okay, I'm gonna get emotional. But like my grandmother, when my grandmother was dying in the hospital and I was still drinking, I was asked to take care of her, right? I was asked to show up to her, to love her, to feed her, to bring her her favorite things, to like accompany her, to watch her watch TV. Like I was asked to take care of. That's what God is, right? I'm asking him to take care of, not control, right? Sometimes control, because sometimes I need to relinquish that. But for me, it's like, can I allow something else to take care of me, embrace me, love me, do for me what I can't do for myself, like things like that. And when it was explained to me like that, I thought, okay, like that's a little bit easier, right? I don't have to give up like everything, even though at that point I would have gave up everything. And in the beginning, our literature talks about next we launch on a course of vigorous action, right? Without the decision in step 3, without launching into the course of vigorous action, without heading into step 4, my decision in step 3 doesn't hold any weight, right? I come from really, really, really strong, big book based, solution based in Hamilton. And so I was always taught that there's no such thing as 1, 2, 3. I was either taught you're either in a 4 or you're like somewhere between 1 and 2, but you can't be on 3. 3 is like literally, we're going to say this prayer, we're going to get up off our knees and we're going to go and write a grudge list and we're going to get into a step 4. And if you're not doing that, you haven't made any decisions. And so for me, it was like simple. And so in Hamilton, we talk about this grudge list. If you know Marty C, it comes from him. And so we make this list, of these resentments and these people and these institutions and these principles, with whom I'm angry, burnt up, sore, or threatened. And when I was in rehab, there was this class called anger management, and I had asked to be excused from it because I told her I wasn't an angry person. But when you look at our 12 and 12, our 12 and 12 talks about like this silent scorn. Favorite 2 words ever put together in any piece of literature. Silently scorning. Like, yeah, that's me. I'm not outwardly aggressive. Sometimes I am, but I'm more inwardly, right? I'm going to implode, not explode. I'm the kind of girl that like will walk away from the argument and then ruminate about what I should have said to you. Or I'll like hop in the shower and I'll like go through the whole argument in my head. And then instead of picking up the phone to call you, I'll like send you a text message this long to tell you what I really thought of you, because I don't want to say it outward, right? That's the kind of anger I have, which I learned is hurt, threatened, sore, or burned up. So I make this list of all these people I've been resentful. Guys, guess how many people went on it? 147. 147 people. And I said I didn't need to be in an anger management class, right? And then I put down like some institutions. I was sexually assaulted in my early 20s, and I had gone to the police station the next morning, and 2 female cops had accused me of being so inebriated that I almost, they didn't use the word deserve it, but I placed myself in that position because I was so drunk. So police went on, right? Specifically female cops. I had a really, really big chip on my shoulder from female cops of that incident, right? And I carried that around for like almost 9 years before I got sober. And principles, and I didn't really have a lot of principles, but that's why I can explain principles is like children should be seen and not heard, or like women deserve to be in the kitchen, like things like that, like these deep-seated beliefs, right, that I was taught when I was maybe little, or that I've grown to believe. And so I put them all on paper and I make this step 4, and this woman guides me through, what a step 4 looks like. It's a 4-column inventory. I put down the person, the institution, or the principal, and then it says like, what has it affected it within me, right? What did they do? That's easy. I can tell you what they did. I've been telling you my whole entire life what you did to me. And then I started to see this column 3 affect my self-esteem, pride, personal relations, sex relations, security, ambitions. I'm probably forgetting pocketbook, right? There's 7 signs of self. And if you've been around for a little while and you have the chance to like dig through that column 3, I really, really, really recommend expanded inventory. I'm a huge, huge advocate of the Katie Parker, Mark Houston style way, where they expand on column 3, right? And I get to see these deep-seated beliefs about me, how I've been looked at, or how I look at the world. And then I get to pray for these people, you know, and everyone goes on my step 4, all abusers, all family that I'm angry at, all of them, and I get to pray for them. And sometimes that sick man prayer is hard. I do it anyways because it's not necessarily about them. It's about me and me being rid of anger, right? Resentment, silence warning, where I've been hurt, right? And where I've been carrying around this garbage. Paige does a really good analogy of step 4 if you ever want to hear it. She talks about garbage and newspapers and stuff like that. And so I get to this last column, you know, where I've been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. I didn't believe I was a scared girl. Today, I know my disease manifests mostly through fear. And then I get to write all that down, all that garbage, right? And I get to do that through a fear inventory and then a sex conduct inventory. And sex conduct inventory is kind of the same way for me. I have my girls make a list of all the people. I know it's not a fun list. And then we run it through the questions, right? Where had I been selfish, inconsiderate? Did I arouse jealousy or suspicion or bitterness? You know, was this relationship selfish? And from that, I get to form these relationship ideals, right? And so my first 4th, I remember I took too long to do it. It took 6 weeks, and I don't recommend any of my girls sitting for 6 weeks with a step 4 because it is emotional turmoil and it's upheaval and it's very uncomfortable, especially, you know, when you're like, I think it was like 4 or 5 months sober at the time. I was like 2 months out of rehab, so not in 4 walls. And my first sponsor canceled my first 5th. It was not her fault, but at the time I would have told you it was. She had movers coming and they came a day early. Like the truth is she had no control of it. And she's like, you want to do this in a coffee shop? And I was like, I cannot tell you all of my sex conduct, like sleeping with married men, and having older men pay for lots of things for me in a coffee shop. Today I know it as like, you know, my story helps other women. My experience holds depth and weight. And there's no shame in that anymore. But I carried a lot of that shame and that guilt. And so eventually I did this 5th with this woman, and we sat in her basement for several hours. I don't remember 5, 6, 4. I don't remember. It's just a very long, the book talks about pre prepared for a very long talk. And this woman opened up her heart and her home to me, who I barely knew. And I literally shared it all with her, right? And it was not freeing for me. I didn't have like this like bright light aha moment. I didn't feel God's presence. I remember I had to take the bus home, and I just remember like thinking like, okay, now I've shared all of this shit with somebody, and now what? Like, are they going to use it against me? Like, you know what I mean? We're getting into 6 and 7. We're going to look at defects of character, but one of my defects of character is like, I don't trust you. Partly because I don't trust myself, but I don't trust you, right? And I've just told you, like I lived a life of crime, like some pretty hard. I ran a lot of drugs in the city of Hamilton, and so for me, it was like, okay, what am I going to do with all this, right? And she tells me I have to go home and I have to take this hour, and I got to sit with my big book and my step 4, and I have to sit with God, and that makes me very uncomfortable. I'm really not into prayer meditation at that point in my recovery. I might have like prayed here and there in the morning, but like the thought of sitting for an hour is excruciatingly long. And she tells me like no music, no social media. You can put a timer on if you want, but like I literally have to sit there. And something happened to me in that hour, right? That woman, when I left her house, said a line that saved my life. And she said to me, if you've left anything out or anything comes to you when you take your hour, or if it comes to you the next day or two, you know, give me a call and we'll talk about it. And that line, I will forever be indebted to her for saying that line, because I held out 2 things, right? Whether they were by omission or I just had so much shame. There's so much shame in my story, you know. I was not raised to be the way I was. I was not raised to sell my body. I was not raised to be that girl The one was that I had a man give me like hundreds of thousands of dollars in exchange for sex. And the second one was that I had a hit and run and I failed to remain at the scene of a crime. So it's two things that I really thought I was going to go to the grave for, two things that I can honestly say I have amended to the best of my ability today, right? And I called her and I told her, and she said, listen, I'm going to be at a meeting tonight. Why don't you meet me and we can discuss it? And she didn't shame me. She didn't guilt me. She didn't judge me. Maybe she judged me in her head. I don't know. But she didn't judge me outwardly. She simply just said, like, yeah, I get it, sis. And she told me stories about when she dealt crack in the city of Ottawa. Like, that's the kind of woman I get to rub shoulders with, right? And I'm not scared anymore. And I trust her a little bit more. And I can hold my head a little bit higher. And I start to see what we call grace. Grace is the unmerited favor of God. It means I don't have to do anything to receive it or to give it, right? As long as I'm living in it and I believe in it. And I start to see that for the first time through her. I start to see that this woman has taken time out of her life to sit with me, to love me, to be with me, to listen to me. And so I went home and I did that hour. Don't even remember the hour, to be honest. I just remember somewhere in that, when I finished, I do this, I do step 6, and I do step 6 a certain way. I ask God to remove each of the defects of character that have come up on that inventory, and I list them. And then I humbly do step 7, right, on my knees. And step 7 prayer is my go-to. I say it every morning before I leave the house. And basically I'm asking God to remove, every defect of character that stands in my way of my usefulness. And see that uselessness in step 1, in the bedevilments, I start to become useful in step 7, right? And I'm not even done my steps. At step 7, I start to see, where my defects of character are, how they haven't been helpful to me, but perhaps I can. Perhaps I can't, God can. And so something happened for me in that 6 and 7. There are 2 paragraphs in our big book. They're the crux of the program. They are essentially the meat and potatoes, right, in our program. If I'm constantly living in God's light and I'm constantly surrendering to this program and I'm constantly asking God to help me be of service, to help me have purpose, to help me have strength, to help me have direction, and to remove from me what blocks me from being of use, that's AA. That is the 12 steps. And it's in 6 and 7. I get up off my knees and I call my sponsor and she tells me, you got to make a list of 8. And I do step 8 and 9 separately. I hope most people do. They are 2 separate steps, 2 separate steps. Step 8 says we made a list of all people we'd harm and became willing to make amends towards them all. It says all twice. So I don't know about you guys, but the book, I believe, it literally talks about being covered in masterly detail. It talks about being in divine inspiration. All means all. Bill Wilson did not mean like half or some or a quarter or what you choose. All means all. All the money, all the sex conduct, all the exes, all the old employers, all, right? And it's scary. And when I tell girls that, they get in their head and they get worried. And I'm like, you're just going to make a list. That's all you're going to do in step 8. We're just going to make the list, right? And then we get to step 9, right? And we get to actually, this is where rubber hits the road. A very dear friend of mine would say separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls, right? We lose a lot of people in step 4 and we lose a lot of people in step 9. And so I get to step 9 and I have this list from step 4, and I have this huge list, 5-page, thank you. We have this huge list on step 8, of all these people I'd harmed. And we do this thing in Hamilton. We take cue cards and we organize all my step 9s on cue cards, and I separate them into piles. Some people do piles of yes, maybe, someday, never. I actually take them right out of step 9 out of the book. So we do financial, we do criminal, we do family, we do sex conduct, business acquaintances. And then I have the girls do a never, I'm not going to swear, but we call it the F no pile, the pile you're never going to touch. You don't believe, you really don't think you're ever going to make these amends, right? And so we sit and we organize it and we go through step 9 in the book, and I have yet to come across a single amends that isn't covered in our literature. And I could do a whole hour talk on step 9 and the power of step 9. I've made amends to my parents. I've made amends twice to my mother because stuff still keeps coming up. I have three best friends that sat me down and had an intervention for me almost 7 months before I got sober. And I was really aggressively angry towards them, and I pushed them out of my life. And these are women I'd have literally taken like the bloody shirts off my back and like tied my hair back and cleaned up after me and taken me home and made sure I got safe. And I'd pushed them all away, and I've made amends to each one of them individually. I've made amends to my aunt who used to have to come and pick me up when my ex had beaten me so bad and I needed to detox. She would come and pick me up, and she would hide it from my mother. And I put her in that position. And I made amends to her. I got to make amends to my grandmother. She's no longer alive, but I had a beautiful amends at sunset by her gravesite. Like, just the power of God, right? I've had to make amends to sponsees, had to make amends to my sponsor. The list just keeps growing. I wish that I had 207 amends by the time I was done. I had 147 people I was resentful at and 207 in amends. Some of those are cab drivers that I dipped on, pizza delivery guys that I just didn't pay, old jobs that I stole from, all the money. I made my last financial amends just before COVID hit. I walked into my old employer, I think I'd owed them about $3,000. I walked in with $1,000, and they didn't want it. And I said, okay, great, but the money isn't mine. And I asked them, what can I do with it? And they said, why don't you donate it to the Niagara SPCA? And so once a month, I make an anonymous donation to the Niagara SPCA, right? And that's how it looks like, how I start to clean up my past. Are all 207 of my amends done? No. Are majority of them done to the best of my ability? Absolutely. Do I have some people that won't respond to me? For sure. I have an ex that I dated for 7 years. He saw me in the throes of this disease. He won't respond to me. I have reached out to his family and his sister and his brother-in-law. I've made amends to my best of my ability with them. It doesn't mean that I'm not willing to make that amends, right? It just means that for right now, God has, for whatever reason, he's put that on hold, and that's okay. That's okay, right? Part of my amends is that it's that I leave the man alone, because I did a lot of chaos in my life with him, right? 7 years of being with an alcoholic. We do a lot of, I think our literature calls us tornadoes. So I don't take the language too lightly, right? Step 9, if you ever want to get a good AA topic discussion, get a good group of drunks that are recovered and throw amends down on the table. And I promise you, you will be lit after the conversation. I've heard some of the most godly stories, the most profound, inspiring things in AA come from making amends. It is by far the hardest thing I think we have to do, to go out there hat in hand, to humbly, like, it is a lot of humility. But my God, it is so beautiful, right? It is so beautiful. And I think one of the greatest gifts is when I get to watch women I work with make those amends, to their children, to their parents, to their siblings, to like watch these women essentially become women for the first time, right? I was really sick. I was really, really sick when I was out there using and drinking. And I get to be a woman today with integrity and accountability and perseverance, right? Brotherly love, service, hope. I get to be that woman today. I know I'm that woman today because I was raised in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. As I'm cleaning up the way of my past, I go into step 10. I know some people confuse step 10 with step 11. They are two separate steps. Step 10 is, the best way I can describe it, is my walking around step, right? It's my, like, am I present in the moment step. It's like the right now step. It's like when I've been selfish or dishonest or frightened or inconsiderate, am I talking to God about it? Am I asking for things to be removed? Am I turning my attention to somebody I can help? And am I telling somebody immediately, right? That's step 10. For me, the best way I have a few girls, a couple sponsees, a couple of friends, and my sponsor and mentors. There's maybe about 5 women that I go to when I'm looking to do step 10. They're all at step 10 and above. And I'll just quickly call somebody when I'm in self. And it happens quite a bit. Doesn't happen as much as it did in my early recovery, but it happens quite a bit. The beast gets on me most days, some days, most days. There's times in my day-to-day living where that old behavior can come back, that silent scorning, that, a mentor of mine calls it like, you're just being chippy. Like I just am off, like I just feel like a certain way. I'm just sending like an impatient text message. I'm just being a little short with my partner, like things like that, right? And today I do have a direct line to God that I kind of know when I'm off kilter. I know when I'm like not on the beam. And so for me, it's like, am I talking to somebody about that? Am I seeking guidance around it, right? Am I bringing God into my daily living through step 10? I find there's a Mark Houston talk on step 10, 11, and 12. And he talks about, if they wanted it to be a 9-step program, they would have made it a 9-step program. But there's 3 steps, 10, 11, and 12, that a lot of people forget about. Because what happens now, and I find, is nobody's keeping me accountable in 10, 11, and 12, right? It's kind of between me and God. And am I doing this thing? And am I holding myself to a different level of standard than I was, say, when I first came in a bit ago? Step 11 for me, it really wasn't hard for me to get meditation. I had run the show for so many years of my life, and I was I was a go girl. I still can be. And for me, step 11, prayer meditation in the morning, it's the only time I have to be quiet. It's the only time of day where it's just like me and God. And I'm an early riser. Like I usually get up at like 10 to 6 every day, quarter to 6, my alarm goes off. Um, I've done that pretty much since I was about 6 months sober. And I crave it. I crave that alone time with me and my creator. I work in the hair industry, and if you know anything about it, like I'm constantly on, right? I'm constantly talking. I'm constantly got to be like in a good mood. And so for me, if I don't start my day with some form of connection to God or grace, the whole day's just shot, because it's run by self. And like, I can't have that. My whole business is dependent on my attitude, right? I can't go into work angry or chippy or just like discontented. I just can't, I wouldn't be successful, period. Like it's just not how the industry works, right? And so for me, step 11 in the morning, our literature literally gives us an outline for step 11. It tells us to list the 24 hours. I have 2 books. I'm pretty disciplined in my step 11. I have 2 books, one for my morning prayer and one for my nightly review. And for me, I list my 24 hours and I write my prayers every morning. I've been doing that for about the last like 4 or 5 years. I write out a prayer every morning to God. Sometimes I'm asking for what I need for the day. Sometimes I'm praying for others. Sometimes it's the continuous prayer. Right now, I'm really trying to be kinder to my partner. It's really like where God has shown me that I'm sometimes not too kind. And so my prayer for the last several days is just to show up in kindness and love, right? So far, I'm not doing a very good job of it, but it's progress, not perfection, right? And sometimes, that is a little bit difficult for us. And then I conclude, I read a lot of spiritual texts. I'm a huge advocate of spiritual literature. Our book tells us to see where religious people are right and use them. Just a little plug. There's a gentleman, a native dude from Ontario. He's Ojibwe. His name is Richard Wagamese. His book Embers absolutely changed my life. I gift it to all the women I work with. I gift it basically to anyone. It's just like his writing is so prophetic, like it is just so godly. I've devoured everything he's written, and I find when I veer from him, I don't feel as spiritually connected, and so I pick back up his literature again, and that's just where my heart's been. It's been in a lot of native teachings since I've been sober. I've had the honor and the privilege of being in powwows and sweats, and seeking that way of life and growing in that regard. Ontario is filled with so many natives. And last summer I got to spend, a weekend up in Manitoulin Island, which it's just, there's so much Indigenous culture up there, and like have so many godly experiences. And then step 11 at night, it asks us to review my day. And I hold myself to a different standard with that. I am accountable. I send my evening review to 2 sponsees. They send it to me. It's not in our literature to do that. It is something I personally do to like I said, one, it keeps a different set of eyes on my life. I have women who I'm being honest with and thorough with, and I have women who can call me out on some things. Um, it also shows the women I work with that I'm doing the same thing. What I'm asking them to do, I'm doing myself. And I write down my step 11. I think I used the app. There's an app. I think I used it for like 3 months, and I just find that it's not good for an alcoholic of my type. I need to, like, our literature talks about black and white, right? Pen to paper. And for me, just being on an app before bed, bluntly, I don't find it spiritual. I just don't find the spirituality of using an app. I find the spirituality when I take 5 minutes out of my day to say a little prayer and to look at some things, where had I been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? What could I have done better? How was I packing the stream of life? And then I conclude with, maybe a little prayer the book talks about. We ask God for forgiveness. And then we don't drift into worry, morbid reflection, right? I'm not there to like criticize. I'm there to constructively review my day, not deconstructively review my day. And then I go to bed, and then I wake up in the morning and do it all over again. It's that simple. I had a really bad summer. I had a lot of shit hit the fan this past summer. There was 4 days where I didn't connect to God. The first 4 days I haven't connected to God since I was probably 6 or 7 months sober. And I felt it. Every fiber of my being felt it. I was really, really angry at God this year. The last year of my recovery has been really, really, really difficult. There's been multiple deaths. There's been a miscarriage. It's just been a very, very difficult year for me. And that takes me into step 12. The book talks about intensive work with another alcoholic. When all else fails, intensive work with another alcoholic. And I remind the women I work with, that's me with other women, and that's me with my sponsor, right? I have to be spiritually fed in order for it to come out. So my sponsor, I'm accountable to my sponsor. I use my sponsor. My sponsor is current in my life. She knows what's happening. I'm a huge advocate of that. I believe in spiritual guidance and spiritual mentorship and being taught. I believe in trying to remain teachable. If I remain teachable, then I'm open to this program and I'm growing in understanding and effectiveness. And that is what my purpose is, right? The book says our maximum purpose is to fit ourselves to be of use to God, his kids. So I need to grow spiritually through that. I first started sponsoring when I was 6 months sober, just under 6 months sober. I've been sponsoring by God's grace ever since. I've never not sponsored. It has been a huge part of my recovery. I did not come into the rooms thinking I would sponsor. I do sponsor quite a few women. Don't ask me how many. It depends on the day. It depends who's sober, and it depends who's in the work. I'm pretty sure we're almost at 24 women I work with. Some of them, do this work. Some of them don't. It has no bearing on me, right? But I'll tell you that it is single-handedly the best gift of my recovery is to watch women get this, to watch the light come on, right? I know what it's like to be the woman that's the best way I could describe it is when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I felt very dirty. I felt ashamed and I felt guilty, and I felt like God had turned his back on me, and I felt that I was not worthy of this unmerited favor of God, this grace. Through the 12 steps, I learned that I am worthy, and that I don't have to actually do anything to deserve grace. I just have to seek it, right? I just have to seek it. And the good thing is our book talks about God doesn't make too hard of terms for those who honestly seek him. And the women I work with women who work with women, and it's a beautiful thing to see. And we do step studies together, and we do steal on steal together, and we have accountability groups together, and we're in workshops together, and we're in service together. And some of us become really, really close. Some of them have become my best friends. Some of them I've watched, their children grow up. I've been a part of their children's lives. We spend time together. It is single-handedly, like I have a sisterhood. I didn't know that, right? I came in and I clung to the men, and I just didn't know that women would become such an intricate part of my life, instrumental part of my life, that I need to be spiritually guided by a woman. I didn't realize too, I need to be taught how to be a woman's woman by a woman, to be, I just really wanted to be a woman of integrity, to what I did and what I said and who I was, they aligned. And I mean, my sponsor, she's so graceful, and grace does not come easy to me. And so if I want what she has, I have to do what she does, right? Quite simply, step 12, one of the things I get the women I work with to do in step 12 is I have them take the 12 principles behind the 12 steps, and then I ask them to define them, and then I ask them to tell me how it applies to their life today. And my God, what a beautiful exercise, because I get to see how these women, show up in faith and hope, how they show up in sisterly and brotherly love and service, perseverance. Um, I don't know I wouldn't be where I would be if it wasn't for sponsorship, right? If it wasn't for that woman asking me to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was a week out of treatment, if it wasn't for her taking my hand and praying in a dingy coffee shop, if it wasn't for her reminding me in my step 5 that I wasn't alone, and if it wasn't for her pushing and prodding me to sponsor women, I would not be here. AA did more than give me a life back. AA, like, it saved me. It took a very useless girl, a very broken girl, and gave a girl, like, I'm not hopeless today, right? Our literature talks about we recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I have hope today. I have a God of my understanding today. And I have sobriety today, right? Just for today. And if I continue to stay in the center of my circle triangle, hopefully for another little bit. Thank you for having me, guys.